Yeah. Wait, so after they leave, we're just gonna find all of the times that Will and John are speaking in the transcript and just cut those, right?
No, it's really easy to do. There's just different audio tracks essentially, and we'll just delete two of the audio tracks.
Okay.
No, I'm leaving that in.
Thanks, Sean. Always great to see you.
Yeah, good to see you.
See you. All right. See you well. Rest up.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Muprov Musings. This is episode number 27. I'm one of your hosts, Hal Munger, and joining me now on the line is Julian Bernardo.
Hello. It is a fine Saturday afternoon, and we are joined by someone that you met very recently on last week's episode. Welcome back to the podcast, Miranda.
Hello. It's an honor to be here for the debrief of what was a very fun show.
Yeah. So, we have Miranda here. Just as last time we did our Hero's Journey debrief with Will, we're going to talk through a bit of a debrief of our Shakespeare show that we did, the Know Me little show that you saw. And also probably talk a little bit more generally about debriefs and stuff. I think it's always interesting to hear our guests' opinions and thoughts about how debriefs go in improv.
Yeah, but before we get into all that, we got a little bit about you, Miranda, but we want to hear a little bit of the Miranda style improv that you're famous for. What things are important to you and what makes you tick? Is this your first tiny character that you've played, or?
Well, actually, something that I'm quite notorious for is I have past improv amnesia. So I really struggle to remember all of the past improv that I've done. So I actually couldn't tell you the last tiny character that I played, but I've definitely played a tiny character at some point, which I really enjoy playing tiny side characters.
They're fun. They're very fun.
But yeah, what improv? If you look back on yourself and think, what's Miranda style improv? Is there anything that you want to impart to the listeners from in that regard?
Yeah, definitely. I think in this show in particular, I got to do one of my favorite styles of improv, which is orchestrating mischievous side characters. And I love that in long form narrative, you have so much opportunity to really get so many different characters that can add to the plot. And you get to explore so many different types of characters. And that's one of the things I love about side characters. And I wish to improvisers who are starting to do things like this to really expand and step out of their comfort zone of characters, because there's so many different ways to add to the plot. And when you are leading with a delightful character, it's bound to be a delightful scene. It's a great chance to do that with you all. It's been a while since I've done a long form show like this, so it was a delight to me.
Yeah, it's very fun, and adding it's kind of nice with these long form narratives where you can have a scene where you're introducing this like mischievous little side character, and that scene doesn't need to like turn into anything that big at that point. Because each scene need not stand on its own in a way that sometimes it does in a more short form context. So
yay, forsooth.
shall we debrief?
Yeah, and for people listening to this episode, if you're listening to this episode and you didn't listen to the last one, you've been played. You got to go back and rewind because we're going to be talking about this. And then also for openness, we're recording this right after we just wrapped the last episode. So, what we're going to be talking about the show that just happened recently in our minds, and it's possible that by the time you listen to that show, I will have put it beneath the editing knife, and some of the mistakes that we may lament here may never even reach your ears, or may never have even reached your ears. So just know that edited improv is still a controversial topic, but I am slowly becoming a better and better improviser editor as we continue to do 1.5 hour long shows.
So this is totally fresh in our minds. We literally just did it. We haven't talked about it at all. So I think this will be fun.
Yeah, hot takes only.
Hot takes only. And before we get into our normal debrief things, do you guys have like impressions of like what was your emotional roller coaster going through that show? Is maybe my question that I wanted to put out to the world.
I can start, and I can say that right in the first couple of scenes, I was like, okay. And then, we got through to, we got to kind of a slow point towards the like maybe 20 to like 50 or 60% part of the show. So a lot of the middle. And that was me like a little like, it feels like we're not maybe coalescing in a great way. And then towards the end of the show, it got really fun and crazy. And I was going, yeah.
Yeah, definitely feel similarly about that arc of the show. In the beginning, I was also getting my Shakespeare gears turning once again, and trying to just lay a platform, not really sure where it was going. And yeah, then I was a bit like, okay, so where's it going? And yeah, then we got to some pieces starting to connect and starting to see those connections, which I think brought the energy up, and I was excited about those, and of course how it ended. So fun.
Yeah, I think we're in a similar boat. I felt like we executed platform very well. We platformed some interesting characters, and then we did not really plot nor plan. And because of that, we didn't really fun zone either. And then at some point we were just like, let's start having fun. And it kind of, you go through your own little ordeal. Maybe you have the moment of like, do we need to restart the entire show, re-record tonight or something? And then you're like, no, we can't. All right, we got to have as much fun with this as possible.
That's always my take. Before we even get into the specific debrief things, is like, it sucks to have an improv show that you like don't feel good about in like a quality sense. That sucks. But the worst possible ever thing is to have that, and also you didn't have fun in the show, right? Like a fun messy show is oodles better than like maybe even in my opinion like a not fun but a bit cleaner show.
Yeah, well, what does Patricia Ryan Madsen say in her book about the monks in the Snowbank?
I'm not going to be able to answer that question.
Okay. Tell us what she says.
Well, or what about the? Sorry, that may have been a deep cut, but I think that one of the common things that is said is go down with the ship. So once you see that the ship has, in this show there was a metaphor, there was a real literal ship that was having a crash, but once you see that the show itself has become a shipwreck, the only thing that you can do is jump onto that ship. And if you see your friend in a trouble, I think the one monk is in the snowbank freezing, and the question is, what should the other monk do? And go and join them and freeze in the snowbank with them, so that at least you're together and happy. And that's the obligation of a good improviser, is to when you most want to leave the stage, to get on the stage and go down with the ship.
And that is what I most love improvising with all of you guys that, yeah, even if the show is crazy and off the walls or has its struggles, it's always you have such a supportive cast around you that whatever kind of snowbank that you're in, someone will jump in it with you, and that's a great feeling. Yeah, I think, like Julian said, the worst feeling is when you don't have fun in a show, and that's when your fellow improvisers aren't in it with you. And yeah, so I love that about improvising with all of you.
And I think that's what Will was doing when he endowed that orgy scene. That was pretty far afield from what Will would normally do in a show, and I think that was Will's like moment of, the storm has struck. He was like, this show is going off the rails. I'm gonna endow an orgy.
Well, too, even like I even think that it's to me that feels like an improv to Suji, in the sense of like sometimes you like a show is feeling like it's off the rails, right? And very literally off the rails. Like there's a way that it was going, and now it's like going somewhere else. But like I feel like the total improv thing is, no, that's the way that we were going. And so now that it's endowed, that there's like, John is pulling this kind of weird, mischievous plan upon like the whole town. It's like, no, let's go all in. Like let's not fret about the fact that we're leaving the place that we were. Let's go all into the place that it seems like it's going. So I was really happy about that hit, because it was like, yeah, fuck it. Let's not beat around the bush about the fact that John has this like weird plan that's very different than anything that had been kind of endowed in the show so far. Let's just go all in on it, was my read of it.
Yeah, exactly. It definitely kind of draws on the principle of game in some ways, that you find that unusual thing, and if you are paying attention to play it out to its most extreme consequence, is always satisfying to the audience.
So shall we do our debrief? Debrief 3 things.
Yeah, these are the debrief 3 things. If you haven't heard them, if you haven't been to the show before, Miranda, you want to say the first one?
The first one is something that you liked that you did or someone else did.
Yeah, sorry for throwing you that without even telling you what they're going to be. The first one is something you felt good about that you did in the show. Okay.
Yeah. That.
And Hal, revenge. What's the second thing? But it's not a real revenge, because
the second thing is something that you want to work on for next time, that you want to focus on for next time based on the show.
And the third one, people get particular about the phrasing of this one, so I'm going to lob it back to you as well, Hal.
Is this something you're thankful for?
Cool. Something you're thankful for that someone else did in the show. I can start if nobody else wants to.
Go for it.
Cool. I felt good about like keeping the reality and the logic like relatively consistent in my head. I think I was messing up on names, but in terms of what was going on, I felt pretty like in it, and I felt like I was able to I don't know, maybe try to call scenes that would make sense, or would involve a meeting of people that would make sense. Something I want to work on is probably just playing more like specific characters in this show. I think I don't know, my character was very kind of milquetoast. There was nothing too particular. I had like an interest in fashion maybe, but it didn't like, that was more of like a detail about my character than a way that my character acted. I was playing just pretty normal. And something that I'm thankful for that someone else did. I mean, we already touched on this, but it ended up kind of consuming a lot of the show. I'm thankful, Miranda, for you coming on as the gnome in the woods. I think that Will was kind of endowing that maybe something weird was going to happen in the wood, and then we got a little bit, but just coming on and yeah, fuck it, I'm going to be the gnome was nice, and led to like a lot of the inspiration for the show. So I thought that was fun.
Thanks. Yeah, I can go next. Something that I liked that I did in this show, I really enjoyed laying down the platform at the beginning, setting up that relationship between the notorious Bailey and John's character Benvolio, and then also coming on as the gnome. And I guess kind of contributing these pieces of kind of like, what is the reality of this world, this version of Malta where there's gnomes. So I'm happy that I did that. It was very fun to lay out those details. Something I would like to work on more for next time, I think, would be to keep building more within the scenes with other characters, especially once we got into the middle of the show. Yeah, I would have loved to have been able to, in the scenes I was in, bring a bit more out of the characters that I was with, to maybe get some more hopes or desires or plans out of them, kind of as a side characters. That can also be a good opportunity to like draw that out of the main characters. And yeah, something that I'm grateful for. Yeah, I would say I'm very grateful to John for laying out probably the strongest plots and plans that we had in the show to curse everyone with loving each other, which, yeah, I think was needed and gave a lot of energy.
Thank you, Miranda. For myself, I think that I did a good job in the opening scene with Will, clearly establishing both of our characters and kind of building out something that had a lot of potential. I want to work more on the sort of just do it element of things, of like get into the brawl, start more scenes, and like especially like I think jump into the Snowbank earlier if thing like, especially if like we're hitting a certain point, we need a plot and plan. Even if my character doesn't seem like the plottiest character, just get out there and start swapping clothing or plotting or and the thing I'm thankful for is Miranda. I really liked at some point you were like, you know, the story of this like thing and I appreciated that. I had not been thinking that there was a story. There was no nothing in my head, but I felt like it showed trust in me that I was going to take that, and it was a delight came from it. So I appreciated both that you put that out there and that you didn't hesitate to agree with whatever I said as what the story was. That felt very improv.
Thank you. Admittedly, I had no way to personally justify what what was happening, so I was glad that you came up with the story.
So now I think let's just kind of have some free flow talk about questions and thoughts from the show. I have a question to you, Miranda, which is this Notorious Bailey character ended up being pretty pivotal. But what was like what were you thinking essentially, like as you were playing Notorious Bailey towards the beginning and then towards the end? Because you came on in the first scene. It was endowed that you were like probably a cruel like owner of the tailor shop, and then you cast John out. But what was your kind of thoughts in those early Bailey scenes?
Yeah. In the beginning, I just wanted to play kind of the cruel person. And then I wanted to develop John's character further. So I thought it'd be a bit more constructive if there was, I was thinking more of like a mentor or parental type relationship. Between Bailey and Benvolio. And yeah, to lovingly send your apprentice out into the world with the idea of maybe Benvolio has to take over the shop one day or something like that. Maybe I could have said that more explicitly, but that I wanted him to learn the ways of the world, so I wouldn't always be protecting him. That was my original thought about the soft underbelly of Notorious Bailey.
And then for the middle part of the show, you played kind of a bunch of different characters. You played gnomes in multiple scenes, or your gnome, Nomius, maybe, and like a barkeep. And then you came back to Notorious Bailey like pretty late in the show. How did your like thinking about playing her change, after coming back to her, and some of the chaos had already unfolded?
Yeah. When I came back, I was kind of more in justification mode, I would say, because John really leaned hard into romantic love for Notorious Bailey.
Yeah.
So then I was thinking about, okay, how does this make sense with what I already had in Bailey's character? And, why would Bailey cast this person out? Because they declared love. And so then that's where I tried to come up with Bailey is afraid of love, or it tries to push all lovers away, because, secretly she wants to protect herself.
And let me double activate here as kind of the final turn of the Notorious Bailey arc and pull you in, Hal, which is between the two of you, how are you thinking about this scene in which it was revealed that Notorious Bailey was the former lover, ? Ages need to be maybe thought of, but of Justinio. Like, did you two go into that scene that we as a trio had thinking that was probably what was going to happen, or how did that play out for the two of you?
Justinio, I was trying to figure out what to do with Justinio.
Yeah.
Who to connect him with, and then we were connected, and then I was like, okay, time to justify it.
Yeah, I think there's a thing where people naturally tend to focus more on their own characters than the characters of those around them, which might be a flaw of people in general, but part of how it works is that if you keep track of your own stuff, then it will work out. And poor Justinio's stuff had not been kept track of in a way that was super great, and I had run into every character but Bailey. So if I was going to have my love be revealed, this was my last opportunity for it. And I was a little frustrated with you, Julian, for, grabbing me on and bringing me in here because of that.
Say more.
Well, just I think part of it was after, I don't know. There was like, there was a moment after the orgy thing where I assumed that was somehow going to have affected my character, that I was going to be caught up in the midst of that. And then we suddenly jumped over to somewhere else and then entering the tailor shop. And I was like, whoa, this is a big pivot. And I was kind of panicking on the terms of like, my last road that I saw out was being closed before me. And I was like, all right, I gotta this person's got to be my love, which maybe I could have stayed another road open, but I wasn't sure what you were thinking for my character in terms of who my love might be.
Yeah, I was thinking it would probably be Bailey. And that's what I was, kind of imagining coming into the scene. Yeah.
So you were gifting me the read of bringing it there, and then once that happened, I was like, okay, this is probably going to be the final scene where everything's gonna, and we wasn't quite that clean, but it was one of the final scenes.
Yeah, well, and it wasn't just a lovers reunite, right? It was you two now know each other's identities and acknowledge the past, and then you tied Hal up and threw them in the closet.
Yeah. I think there was once the gnomes were revealed, there was no way I could see our love being ignited. And we also, we're missing some Shakespeare elements of hidden people bound to not talk about what they know. And so I thought that was a fun thing to add, and that was also with the contribution of Hal as a gnome as well.
Yeah.
That was a silly moment where it's like there need to be 3 of us on stage. And I was like, okay, I guess I'm one of them. But that was a fun it all wrapped up there. So thank you, Julian, for my initial reaction was frustration at the start of the scene. I can give you appreciation for the 4D chess that you were playing.
Any other big like touchstones for people of like moments in the show where we had kind of strong feelings as improvisers?
Bruh, when Will ran into John, I love Will, but John was wearing that hat, and Will's internet had been going in and out, so I think he must have missed that. John was like, "Look at me, I've got a flag," and he was moving his hand like trying to show Will that he was wearing the flaggy hat. And there were no mistaken identities in the show, but it all worked out. But in that moment, I was like, "Oh, is he gonna see the flag?" And then it didn't happen. I was like, "Never mind. Okay, there's no mistaken identity, but that's okay."
I thought that Justinio and the prince, like their separation could have been like, some catalyst for mistaken identities or something like that. Or maybe more hijinks could have been found there. But maybe the prince kind of went off into his own plot, and then Justinio into his own lamenting of lovelessness.
Oh, Julian, that's what that was the moment where I think I was actually like, "Oh, Julian, what made you choose to be the person that the prince fell in love with?"
I don't know. I don't think there was a lot that I was thinking of before going into the scene. I think I just just entered the scene. Did you have like a different idea?
I just sent Benvolio into the forest. So I was assuming that was going to be the knot that started to tie. That
was part of it though. Was I think that I was getting caught up about the bread logic. So the bread logic was that when someone says your name, so if you eat the bread and then someone says your name, you fall in love with them. But Benvolio got sent into the woods to shout Notorious Bailey's name, and so I just thought that was like a logical miss, and so I was like, someone needs to say this prince's name. I think was now that you mention it, part of my thought there.
Okay, that's funny. I messed with the bread logic too then in later scenes with John, unfortunately, but my assumption was just that he would go into the woods and somehow say the prince's,
Yeah, I thought maybe a lot of us would end up getting into the woods, or just maybe Bailey would get into the woods, and then that's when that's how John shouting her name would end up being relevant at some point, which was all to say my little split second assessment of the situation before joining that scene.
Yeah, but the bread logic was not fully thought through on my part.
No, I mean, this magic logic is hard in shows, right? Like I think we've all had...
when you make these rules.
Yeah, how both in this show reflecting and in previous shows, like how do we think we can best like communicating it clear about some of these like magical systems that we endow that have like specific rules?
That was with the bar scene. I really wanted to clarify what the magic did right away. And I kind of like, I always have like ideas of how it might work or whatever, but I was a character who didn't know how any of the gnomes work. But I tried to endow like, I'm entering like, oh, tell me more about these gnomes, but that didn't really help the situation in terms of actual support. So I should have, I think, entered as another character who knew more about the gnomes and talked about them with someone. That way I wasn't asking someone to one-sidedly build out a gnomish magical system.
Yeah, I mean, you can always do, come on with the like. So you're saying that the gnome magic works like da 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 da, like you're entering that part of the conversation. But I know that's a little hammy for your taste. Yeah.
I love a good hammy. Just speak whatever is confusing out loud explicitly.
Yeah.
Yeah. But then once we see it happen once, then with the prince falling in love with your character, Julian. Yeah. I also feel like maybe I could definitely, there was a connection between your characters, but I feel like it could have been like overwhelming. I thought it would be like love that makes people crazy.
Yeah. And it kind of did end up being that by like the orgy. Oh, this is a sidebar, but what are we thinking of as like the logic of the orgy, right? Because aren't they all supposed to be in love with John?
I think that he just gave a ton of bread out, and then they were maybe just speaking each other's names and stuff like that.
Okay. Because John was saying the thing about like everybody whose name I know, but yeah, that what you say makes the most sense. That he just gave the bread out, and then people were saying each other's names.
Oy, oy, oy.
I guess I have a question about because you mentioned the pointing of the love arrows, and I think I kind of lost track of that a bit at the beginning. Like how, yeah, would it have been helpful to really, like with our main characters, they just explicitly state who they love at the beginning? Or do we feel like we were missing that, or somehow we like lost the direction of it?
I think that it would have been good, at least for me, I think clarifying who I should have done this myself. I could have said, if I had clarified which other character was my lover, that would have made it easier for everyone else. I think Will, like, even just when he heard the voice in the woods, could have immediately pointed his love arrow. And then, yeah, like you were saying, like strongly pointed at Julian's character, who we didn't really know that much about at that time yet, even still. But yeah, I think they were kind of slow in coming out, and there was some confusion of like John thought that he loved you romantically, and you did not seem to be thinking that was the case. And I don't think we were necessarily calculating for John having romantic feelings for your character.
Well, I thought from day one John was DB for Notorious Bailey. But yeah, I totally buy that this was thought of differently by everybody in the cast.
Well, we had this whole scene of like, I'm so old, I'm about to pass away.
Yeah, that's in the first scene, and I should have made this clear. In the first scene, I was thinking I was loving John, and John was loving Bailey, and that was like the maybe dynamic. I came on thinking, oh, I probably love this guy after a few lines, and then when he was DB for Bailey, I was like, oh, and then that'll be our like love arrow conflict. But then all that kind of got washed.
Yeah, I think one aside of turning out and say, oh, my heart aches. I think that's just like what you got to do in those early scenes is turn out the and say, my heart aches because I love this person. Yeah. And then like, yeah, with the plots and play, we had this whole Tailor thing, and there was no clothing exchanges. It was like he was given a spare hat that didn't look like anyone's hat necessarily, and then John put on the other hat, but then that was forgotten about, and it was just like.
Yeah, I was definitely not tuned into the actual tailoring in the show, the fashion and the clothing and the headwear of the characters.
Yeah, it mostly came in superficially. There was like maybe going to be the thing about the mistaken hat identity, but didn't really come to fruition. And then I lost all of my hat logic. and I had to devote my brain to bread logic instead. Yeah, and we should know in debrief sense, as you know, if you're listening to this and as like a model of how you might talk about a debrief, you should try to have everybody there. You know, we are all in different locations, so collecting all of us is a Herculean effort. But when you do your own debrief, everybody being there is definitely the ideal way to do it.
Yeah, and this is not how we normally debrief. We're pretty intimate with each other. Julian, I was throwing some moments of at you. Were there any moments in the show where you're like, "How? What is happening?"
There was time to time where I felt like your character was, maybe you weren't doing, you were just kind of maybe a little too into your character at certain times, or like, I think in a similar way to what you had mentioned before, like your character had been very sad and very lamenting, and you were very strong in that character. But maybe at times it felt like that was at expense of like endowing or justifying or like giving gifts to others.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Yeah, I definitely did not it did not make use of that scene where we first interacted on the beach. That's one of those ones that might be cut from the entire thing.
Yeah. What go.
I loved the setup of it. Like I feel like the platform for the whole show in general was definitely super strong. Of having the love torn character, the one seeking love, and then somehow brought apart from the shore. I thought that at least I found like a fun scene. So that's me advocating for not taking it out. That I thought it was like a great platform scene.
Yeah. And like we already talked about on the show, the fact that the other island, real William Shakespeare show, The Tempest, does not have a super normal plot anyway. So we kind of did a Tempest run where we we platformed a lot, and then some wacky stuff happened. And then
I gotta say, I love John for I don't So this was the kudos that you gave John about doing the plotting and planning, but another angle of it that I was really happy about was in that scene where John comes on and is like scrawling Bailey's name on the tree and stuff. It was just very high energy in a big way that I think like often sometimes there's a show and we're in this stage where a lot of us are like maybe a little lower energy because we're just confused and we're trying to like figure out what's going on. And I feel like I am almost always very grateful when someone comes on with that big high energy scene. It feels like it like centers the focus in a very big way that I tend to enjoy.
What was the energy like heat map of the show?
Like over the different parts of the show. Are we thinking linearly or like?
Yeah, I feel like the initial ship had pretty high energy. The first gnome interaction had pretty high energy. The second gnome interaction, obviously the end. Maybe it's just whenever there were gnomes, it was high energy. And whenever orgy, whenever there were without gnomes, it was lower.
Yeah, I tried to come on big in my last scene with Will. I realize that is one of the ways in which I feel like I want to truly work. Like, always in these debriefs, we say like the things we want to work on, but like, every time I come on with a big big emotion, I feel like the scene is so much easier. That's something I want to keep on doing.
Yeah, definitely the love emotion in the end. And then also when your character really believes in something, and the way you were bringing everyone together in the end, this added a lot of like, okay, we all know where we're going now. So I appreciated that.
Yeah, that was crucial. You were like, it's Act 4, baby. Let's all go to the tailor shop.
Since we have you here, Miranda, I think it's always interesting. Like, uh, let's meta up one level. How do you typically feel in improv debriefs? Are there like parts of them that you like would specifically advocate for? Like, oh, you liked it a lot when, the Simps did this thing when we were in it. Or, oh, like maybe since my time away, there's these other principles that I enjoy, because feedback in improv is like a very touchy thing. And just as Hal noted, like maybe the way that Hal and I talk to one another about it is probably not the way that I would expect a lot of like troops talk about it, and it could get prickly. So what's your take, Miranda?
Yeah, definitely. And I really appreciate the way you guys talk about it, which is just like so open, analyzing like as you could any show. And yeah, I also really love the way Sims did it, like starting off with these three things and instantly makes the debrief so much more constructive, I think, because it's so easy to get caught in kind of the details and not have this more global view of like, okay, there were good things that happened. There were also things to work on. And then, other people did great things. So I think it's a really good framework for feedback. And yeah, especially in the coaching or teaching that I do, I really like to emphasize the positive things that people do and highlight those as much as possible. And then when there's a learning opportunity from a scene, like that's what it is. It's just a learning opportunity, which is always cool in a class because I think people are pretty open to then like, oh, I can learn something from that. But it's always be a thin line to walk, especially people who are new to improv or not in a super comfortable environment. Like the way you frame feedback, I think is important. And yeah, I try to frame it positively, like, cool, for next time we get to all work on clarifying each other's names and using them.
Yeah. Very, very growth mindset, because it's not like an individual improv show is that high. Like you talk about forgetting every show that you leave. And like in this case, we do have the podcast where we're putting out one show, but in general, it takes us an hour to make an improv show. So you can really be like, rather than fretting over, was this the perfect hour? Be like, oh, like we're learning, we're moving, we're having fun, and it's better to remember the joyous moments.
Yeah.
What were some joyous moments from this show?
Ooh. It was, I mean, I didn't even expect you to come on in the first scene, Miranda, but when you did, and just all the shit you were telling John, I thought was very funny. Of like kind of bossing him around, but you had like this weird relationship. I think it was hard to put a name to, but I was very delighted whenever you two shared a scene.
Yeah, that was the relationship I felt like I could have the most fun in. And yeah, also something I found delightful was the gnome shenanigans and the way you came on in that first gnome scene, also, Julian, to heighten the mischievousness by stealing from Will's wallet. Yeah, that was so fun to me, and I felt very supported in that moment with another gnome on stage.
Yeah, just the second you said gnome, it was so much fun, because that was kind of what you were. Like initially I had thought the voice like was going to be someone that he was going to fall in love with, but he reacted and was like, oh, this is strange. And you put, but you didn't quite seem like a fairy either. And it was like, what is this thing? Like, what's happening? And then you were like, gnome. And it was like, okay, this clarifies. We now understand exactly what's going on. That was awesome. And then, of course, the ending part of just like the bam, bam, bam of suddenly having so many gnomes.
It was so delightful. It was delightful because it was discovery, and it's not something that I think I would do. But it was so delightful for John to also be three gnomes, right? Like there's something in me that in that scene I was like, oh, what? He wasn't three gnomes. But it's like, what? Why can't he be three gnomes? And it was so fun, and I loved it. And it's, I guess it all comes down to style and preferences, but those are the moments in shows that I'm like, yeah.
Yeah, it's the kind of thing you can really only do in a final scene.
You don't think that could have been the opening scene of our show?
I think it could have been, and it should have been.
Could have been the center mess everything up scene.
Well, what would the show be like if it had started out with your two relationship and then John had turned aside and be like, oh, I beat three gnomes in love, but I could never speak. And Miranda turned aside, I also beat three gnomes.
I think we would have focused on that part of it too much if that had been endowed early on. Where I think the most important thing about them being three gnomes was just I don't know. Did it ever really matter that you two were gnomes instead? Like it mattered at the end that John was gnomes too, because there was like the like number love issue maybe. But if nobody had been gnomes, what would have been different?
I wouldn't have been put in the closet.
Yeah. And I guess it ties in that Bailey was in the whole show secretly.
Yeah,
I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, really, really tied the gnome logic together, I would say.
Yeah, Miranda, were you hoping as a gnome to be more fleshed out and become like a character and get into the love game?
Yeah.
Or were you just hoping to cause chaos?
Yeah, I think I was more on the causing chaos side. I was considering getting into the love game when I was like, okay, the next thing that speaks your name, you'll fall in love with. So I thought it could have been very funny to have Benvolio fall in love with a gnome. And yeah, kind of classic Midsummer Night's Dream type of deal. But yeah, then I punted it away. So I I could have, but I chose to stick to just chaos.
And let me flag, like this magic bread, look, we're calling it gnome bread, but that was a love potion, right? In all ways, shape, or form. That was a love potion that we were dealing with in this show. And potions in general, and specifically love potions in Shakespeare are like like a once per run thing, probably.
Yeah, and when Julian says once per run, he's talking about a run of shows, which would tend to be 6 to 8 shows, not once once per. He's not saying once per show put in a potion. He's saying 1/8 of your shows are allowed.
Like 12 to 15% of the time, you should have a love potion.
Yeah, and you can see why. It's really hard to get the right people potions to drink at the right time. In a way, and make everyone work in a way that's interesting. In this case, we didn't have enough people really eating the bread. Like, honestly, once the orgy started, we probably should have seen like who else ate the bread. You know what I mean? Like maybe your character ate some bread. Who's falling in love with who? That was kind of the moment of the fun zone. But no one else ate the bread.
Yeah, and I think then also to have the orgy as like this, I guess that was the mess everything up, play around part. I was glad that Will added that in, just to get a bit more ridiculousness in there. And yeah, at least I love some rogue hits like that.
Rogue hits.
Like, well, you probably wouldn't have an orgy in a Shakespeare play. There are these moments, like I'm thinking in Julius Caesar, where like, suddenly Act 2, like everything's on fire and just chaos. Like if I got the sense that was where the intermission would be. If it's lights down, Benvolio. Oh, I'm going to spread the bread. Intermission, lights up. there are 20 people on stage and Will's fighting his way through a mass of bodies and et cetera, et cetera. And now, and like giving it that framework in my head now, suddenly I think that during that scene, it actually should have been like a split scene. And the second Will was like, I'm clawing my way through the orgy. I think we would have figured this out on stage too, is the fact that it's an orgy probably means every character should be on stage, even if they're not part of the orgy. I think that if all of us had been there and just said like, what am I doing? Like, oh, I'm the tailor. I'm hiding in my shop. I'm this person. I just ate a loaf of bread, but no one has said my name yet. I don't know what's going on. I'm this person. But it was kind of shocking enough that I think all of us were like, ooh.
Yeah, let's see what Will's doing here. Let's let him cook.
Yeah, but that's very true. It was kind of one of these like reality shifting hits that I think like the show definitely needed at that point, like to jump forward to something having happened. And yeah, it would have been fun to see then how all the characters react to that.
We are coming up relatively close to time, so I think we have time to air maybe some final thoughts about the show, and then we have a question we want to ask you, Miranda. And yeah, so any last thoughts about this fun Shakespeare run that we did? I'll say on a meta level, we came into it very giggly, and I think we exited it very giggly. We had like a death of giggle in the middle, and then it came back.
A
death and rebirth.
Yeah,
the ordeal. I think that's the main takeaway from this show, debrief wise, is once you're in a show that goes off the rails, what are some things that you can do to get it back on? And one of them is the jump to the moon or whatever, that Will move that was made by both Miranda putting in gnomes and also Will adding in the orgy. And the other one, which I think is even like more essential, is this get on stage, have fun, support your partner.
Yeah. Jumping into the snowbank. I like the metaphor.
So Miranda, all of the guests here on Muprov Musings get the illustrious opportunity to push whatever kind of pub something that they're doing, push an agenda or doctrine, describe some media that they really like. This is your opportunity to, get on that soapbox and say what you want to say to our millions of listeners.
Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. It's definitely not an opportunity I want to waste personally. So ever since I found out I would be asked this question, I've been thinking really long and hard about what it is that I want to tell your listeners about. Really what's speaking to my heart right now is something I learned about when I moved to Zurich. And it is a different way to, you could say, clean your soul. And there's a product that everyone uses here called they're these little sponge cloths. And there's something in between a sponge and a dish towel, I would say.
It's big, it's malleable.
It's malleable, but when it's malleable when wet, but it dries solid.
Scrub daddy style.
And I would say it's maybe like 5 to 6 inches by inches, square inches. And you can really use it to clean anything. You could even put it in the washer. And it's a great solution for not using paper towels.
Wait, but can we get one in the US?
Is there any way, or are you just kind of gloating to the rest of us that they solved a problem that is bad out here? Is there anything that we could do to Google it, or?
Yeah, I mean, I chose to share this one specifically because you can find these things in the US, whereas you can't find direct democracy, widespread public transportation, robust recycling programs in the US. Yeah, so this was one piece that I thought maybe your listeners would actually find useful.
Yeah, and just to be clear, what do we Google if we want to find this thing?
This is gonna sound crazy,
Uh,
but you should Google Swedish dishcloth.
okay.
Wait, Swedish
Swedish
dishcloth?
dishcloth.
Yeah, I think all of your listeners in Sweden are gonna know about this one.
Wait a second, but it's from Switzerland?
Or is it just
You know-
available there and in many other places?
I'm not going to make any generalizations based off one country in Europe for other countries in the world, but I definitely know they exist in Sweden too.
I'm verifying. You can actually just Google that, and I see them here. Well,
all right. Well,
thank you so much. You had a Hal.
Oh, no. I'm doing what you're doing.
Well, thank you so much, Miranda. I will thank you, and Hal might thank you too.
Yeah. Without you, we would have no Swedish dishcloth, no gnomes, and no joy in our lives.
Well, thank you both so much for having me. I was honored to be on and so happy to do improv with you too.
Of course. In any
No
case.
way.
This has been Muprov
Musings. So my sign off is I realized how easy it is to make syrup. Do y'all know how easy it is to make any kind of syrup?
You talking maple syrup or any kind of syrup?
Maple syrup would be hard maybe. But for example, there's this coffee place that I go to. It's called the Misfit Society Coffee Shop. And it looks like that in there. But they have this banana coffee that I love. But I'm not trying to spend all that money on coffee every day. So I made this banana syrup, and it's so easy. Do you know what you do to just make syrup?
Right? What do you do?
You get whatever thing you want to syrupify. You get water and you get sugar. You boil the water and sugar, and then you just throw in the thing, simmer it, strain it, and then that thing, that goopy little goop now contains the essence of whatever you did. So I've mostly been experimenting with fruits so far, but apparently you can make all sorts of tea or like herb based syrups as well. Like that's how you make lavender syrup. And maybe this is not new to people, but to me, I was very mind blown that like the kind of thing that you get in a little squeeze jar or like one of those like Torani syrup things, it's very easy to just craft at home in like 20 minutes.
That's pretty cool.
What syrup would you guys make?
End to the coffee shop tyranny of syrup.
Yeah. And I'll ask again, well, what syrup would you guys make?
Now that you said that, I mean, the first thing that came to my mind was onion, which is not good. But I guess I was thinking like onion powder, onions or whatever.
Yeah, now I'm kind of curious about what the essence of different things would turn out to.
Yeah, you could literally, I mean, I haven't experimented, but you could do like chicken tenders even literally, right? Mm-hmm. And get essence of that just in the water.
Yeah, for me, I would probably do a mint syrup.
Oh, yeah. Someone was telling me to do that. That's a good syrup. And then as a final, do you guys say syrup or syrup?
Syrup.
Syrup.
Oh, Miranda, what thing do you say weird? You say one weird, right?
Yeah, that is true. We know this truth about you.
Wait, what do I say weird?
You say one thing. I don't remember, but I remember you say something weird.
Oh, jam the juice. I say jam the juice.
Jam the juice?
I didn't remember it being that, but that's hilarious. Jam the juice.
My argument is that you can say pajamas, not pajamas. And so you can say jamba juice, not jamba juice.
Oh, I thought you said jam the juice, like Winnie the Pooh.
Oh, jam. Well, that would be that would be inappropriate for you to call that store Jam the Juice. That's not even what it's called. But Jam the Juice. That's sick.
Thank you.
Sick and twisted.
This is a sidebar, but Julian, do you know about sap?
Yeah, or somewhat, right? You put the pipe in the tree and then you can get the sap.
But do you know what its vibe is? Because obviously there's like the sticky sap that you get from touching trees or whatever.
Sure.
But have you ever like drinking a glass of sap?
No.
So like before maple syrup becomes maple syrup, it's maple sap, which is basically just water that not only tastes better than normal water, it is also like healthier for you. It has all these like special, things in it that are good for you.
You're for real right now?
Yeah.
Yeah, and
It sounds amusing.
the main reason that like it's not available to humans as like something that you can go to the store and buy a bottle of sap is because it's only available at like the seasons when trees are doing that, and it's really hard to store and package and stuff like that. So
Can you get sap from any tree?
I think maybe, I don't know, but certainly like if you at the right time go up to a maple tree and stick a thing in it, basically just liquid comes out that's just water that tastes better, and if you boil that like to 1/40th of the size of its original thing, it becomes a syrup.
I just don't get how it's like healthier than normal water, but it's also literally exactly maple syrup, right?
No, because it's like a lot less sweet than maple syrup, because if you boil everything out, then you only get the sugar in,
Okay, sure.
It's got like
if you
tree
diluted
minerals and
maple
stuff.
syrup.
And also,
Big time.
I was being pitched it by like some really, maple sap oriented maple farmers or whatever. So
Yeah,
they probably
sounds
it's
like
healthier than normal
sources.
water, but maybe it's less healthy than normal water. But
Yeah, I'd be suspicious of big sap out there,
Yeah.
well, it
I
blew
believe
that
it.
was like the big thing that blew my mind was trying sap and being like, oh my god, all my water could be this.
Guess you just have to move to Vermont now.
Oh, can't you see me now? Can't you see me now? Like you did back then. Can't you see me now? I remember way back when. Oh, and times they are changing. Things are rearranging. Can't you see me now? Can't you see me now? Everything is changing. Can't you see me now? Can't you see me